If you love Baltimore sports, you'll love WNST.net.
So we're here at the Baseball Museum, Negro Baseball Hall of Fame, and we're in Kansas City. And this room is kind of an iconic room. This is what I remember about being here the first time, right?
Well, let me correct you first.
Yeah, go ahead.
Not the Negro Leagues Hall of Fame. It's Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. It's an important point I want to make to you because there is a Baseball Hall of Fame. You know, our friends in Cooperstown. Sure. And they are grateful. We're grateful to them for honoring many of these legends from Negro Leagues Baseball. But we don't want to create a separate or segregated Hall of Fame. Negro Leagues existed because of segregation. And so we didn't want to create a segregated Hall of Fame.
Wow. Okay.
So it's a very important philosophical point for us.
So you're a museum, but not a Hall of Fame.
Not a Hall of Fame. But we do have a special section near the end of the museum as you work your way around this area that we call the Field of Legends. After you learn all the history, before you get there, there's a special section that has information on those players who have been honored by the Hall of Fame. And among the statues here on the field, many of them are honored by Cooperstown. Many of the greatest players of all time. And we can go inside and take a look at them. But when we built the museum here, we used those who are already inducted as kind of the models for this field.
Cool.
So we're here on one part of the museum that deals with the 1920s and the founding of the Negro Leagues. And I wanted to bring you here because you get every element of the museum here. The museum flows on a timeline of African American and baseball history. We tell our story through photographs and the statues and a handful of artifacts that we have here at the museum. And this section deals with primarily the founding of the leagues. I want to point out the statue behind us here. This is Andrew Foster, better known as Rube Foster, credited as being the father of black baseball. Foster was a great athlete in his own day, but became a manager and team leader. And a
promoter to some degree.
Very much a promoter.
Yeah.
He was named the first president of the Negro National League once they decided to get the leagues organized. I should make this point very quickly that there were independent black teams playing all around, not a regular schedule, not a league structure where they could guarantee they were going to make some money. You were traveling like a circus most of the time, and if you didn't have a regular schedule, then you didn't know what your paydays were going to be, couldn't be sustainable, and there was always this push to try to build a league.
He made it a business.
He helped make it a business, he and many others, but he became the primary leader. You either loved or hated Rube, but everyone respected him. And he really helped develop, especially in a place like Chicago, which is where he was based. They could take advantage of the large growing black population there, a large stadium, that he had connections with Chicago White Sox, and it made it flourish for a while there. And these pictures show you some of the teams and where they were located. We know Baltimore and the Baltimore Black Sox were one of the early champions in the late 20s and early 30s. Kansas City had great teams that were in and around Philadelphia and Indianapolis, mostly Midwestern at first. And then as you get back east to Baltimore and the Philadelphia area and New York area, you start to see more teams form. We wanted to just bring up highlights of things that have happened in the last 25 years, the founding of the museum and building of new exhibits. We got just a small amount of artifacts, new artifacts that we've recently acquired, photos mostly, and there'll be some things we'll add to this in the next days or two, a few days from now, but paintings and different things, and probably most notably is our celebrity wall here.
Oh, let's go over there. So a lot of players come here, right? Like when visiting teams come to town, a lot of managers have brought the whole team here, right?
A couple of them have. Maybe not as much as you think, but still it's growing as far as interest from the standpoint of opposing teams coming to town. We make an outreach to them that they could come. Of note, when Lou Piniella was manager of the Seattle Mariners, he brought the entire team. And the Chicago White Sox, after the 2005 World Series the next season, brought the entire team.
Ken Williams probably put that together.
Yeah.
Sure.
And he had been to the museum that winter, and he promised to bring the team, and he did. Then Isaac Yen, when he was manager at the time, has always been supportive of the museum in different ways. And there are a number of individual players who have been supportive. like Torrey Hunter in particular. Former players like Ozzie Smith and Dave Winfield have been especially.
I think Adam Jones has been here, yeah?
I believe he has.
Yeah.
Baltimore came a few years ago. Usually what happens is they come as part of a media thing. The pregame show, they bring them. And, you know, guys are tired and they come in and they're not expecting a whole lot. But then when they get here, they're pleasantly surprised. So we've had, in that way, the Orioles, we've had the Angels, we've had, most recently, the Milwaukee Brewers come in, and they really have a good time, and they learn a lot of history, and they're pleasantly surprised. But that's just athletes, baseball players. If you look at this wall, we welcome all kinds of dignitaries, including world leaders, political leaders, actors and actresses. Most of this is visitors who come to the museum here in Kansas City, but sometimes we go out and we run into people at different events and things like that.
Eddie Vedder's been here. Look at that, right? Yeah. Pearl Jam, perfect.
Yeah, the group, of course, he's a huge Cubs fan.
Right.
And the group was playing in town, and he came by and got a chance to visit. You see President Clinton there, Vice President Gore, Henry Aaron, First Lady Michelle Obama. Film 42 came out. The actors Harrison Ford and Chadwick Boseman were here. Colin Powell, Erykah Badu.
What's the Geddy Lee story? Geddy Lee was a contributor here, right?
Oh, Geddy is a huge baseball fan and is a huge collector as well. Geddy has a friend here in town who helps him sometimes with memorabilia purchases. And so the band came to town, and his friend brought him by the museum so he could see and learn about it. And he got a great tour from the staff and fell in love with the museum, so to speak. So after that, a large collection of signed baseballs became available at an auction. And working with his friend, he said, well, we can buy these balls. And then ultimately they decided to donate them to the museum. And so the next time the band was in town, we were able to do a nice press conference with Geddy to announce the purchase. This is about a few months after we actually got the donation. And then about a year or so later, year and a half later, we were able to get the display of the baseballs put together. And the band was on tour again, and he came back to town, and he got to see it. So it's exciting. In fact, they're touring now. He may be in a few days.
I saw him a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
This place is good enough for Geddy. It's good enough for us.
So a number of teams do salute to the Negro Leagues games around the country. The Kansas City Royals are leaders in that, and we've worked with them almost 20 years now in putting together some of these programs. And so these are just examples of some of the uniforms that have been worn by the Royals and opposing teams. And the video is video clips from various Salute to the Negro League games in the last few years. So it's a very proud program, and we have the Royals, as I noted again, are leaders in this, but other teams like the Pirates, the Brewers, even the San Diego Padres for a while were doing salutes, even though there's not a major Negro Leagues history in San Diego. And so you can see some of the opposing teams, and these are all replica uniforms from some of those games. So it's always an exciting day at the museum and in the city when we have Salute to the Negro Leagues. So baseball leagues continue on up and down through the 20s and 30s, and then you get to the 1940s and World War II. The participation, in particular of African Americans in the war effort, is being noticed by lots of people around the country. Of course, they're fighting for freedom abroad, but not getting certain rights at home, and that's not lost on a lot of people. In one of those areas where they're getting denied opportunity is baseball. I mean, one of the great examples of that lack of opportunity is in Washington, D.C. On Sundays, you could go to Old Griffith Stadium, which is in the black neighborhood in D.C., and watch the Homestead Grays, who had moved from Pittsburgh area to play games in Washington, in north part of Washington, and take advantage of the crowds and the revenue that they could get there. And they were in the midst during the 40s of about 9 straight Negro League pennants. You go on Tuesday and watch the Washington Senators, which may have been one of the worst teams in baseball history.
For sure.
So as a white fan, you could go on Sunday to go to a black baseball game and then come back on Tuesday and see the difference And then you start to question these things. Well, why can't we? I just saw a group of players who could hit and catch and run and do better than what we have. Why can't we have those players?
Were some of the fans primarily white, that supported Negro baseball, or was it its own community that supported it and bought the tickets?
Well, here's what you have to understand is that black fans enjoyed watching Babe Ruth. They enjoyed watching the New York Giants. But they also had opportunities to go and watch 14 doubleheaders at the Polo Grounds, too, of black teams.
So black teams did play in white stadiums.
They had to, because they didn't own their own stadiums for the most part. There were a few exceptions. But the Monarchs, for example, here in Kansas City, rented the Muehlebach Stadium, which was owned by the Kansas City Blues, a New York Yankees minor league team. The Newark Eagles played in the stadium for the Newark Bears, a Yankees minor league team.
Okay.
And let me throw another thing at you. They played 14 doubleheaders also at Yankee Stadium. So the Yankees are making money off of the Negro Leagues in addition to their own baseball. And so they're not in any hurry to integrate when they're making money in these ways. If they wanted to have big events, they had to rent the larger ballparks. And that's what happened. Again, there were some exceptions to the rule. There were a few teams that did have their own stadiums, but for the most part, they played in major league or minor league ballparks. And Griffith Stadium in D.C. was one example of that.
That's where my mom met my dad. True.
Is that right?
True story.
So, and Howard University Hospital is on that site now. So, a historically black college. So, fans begin to question these things. White fans could go to ball games. They question these things. The press picks this up. And then you start to see a little bit of movement towards this. And even in New York, there's a big push for the integration of baseball. And that's when the Dodgers come on the scene. And this is when we get to
Jackie Robinson and Branch Rickey right there.
First,
that's a great quote, by the way. That's fantastic.
And Rickey was a very religious man. He was also a businessman. He saw, first of all, the talent that was available. He also saw the potential revenue that was available from having an influx of fans coming over to watch these games. And he knew that there was going to be some pushback, but...
pushback from a lot of people in his own organization, right? He was reviled by certain people in his own organization for doing it, right?
Ultimately, though, Robinson's play helped win everyone over because he was a good athlete. And
he belonged.
He belonged, and he was successful, and he proved that he belonged. And he made it possible for others to come after him, although at a slower pace, and although not his fault, obviously, because the talent was always there. But they were able to push along. It still takes from 1947, when he debuts with the Dodgers, to 1959 before every team has at least one black or Afro-Latino player. It's important to talk about that distinction, too, because darker-skinned Latin players from Cuba or Puerto Rico couldn't play in white baseball either. So his success is important biculturally in that way.
So we've reached a very important part of the museum, the Geddy Lee collection. How cool is this? So there's a lot of baseballs here. I mean, this is incredible, Ray. I mean, it looks like a couple hundred baseballs, right?
Actually, in these cases, it's 330 baseballs. They're actually, the whole collection was well over 400 baseballs. And there are some duplicate signatures here, but there are some unique ones that folks may not be aware of as far as people who participated in black baseball. And that's important for these are all black baseball players.
Is this Geddy Lee, the lead singer from Rush?
That is, yes. Geddy Lee, the lead singer from Rush.
Okay. No, I know he's a big baseball fan. So yep. I was just checking.
That's him. And
he's Canadian too, I might add.
Yes.
Sounds like you're Canadian.
I know.
Yeah. I love the Canucks.
So, of note in this collection, there were women who played with the men in the Negro Leagues briefly in the 50s. And we have one of the first ones, Tony Stone. And so we have a Tony Stone ball as part of this collection as well. Great Don Newcomb, who was one of the players with the Brooklyn Dodgers, helped integrate baseball. And Charlie Pride. Charlie Pride, the great country singer Charlie Pride, who started out playing baseball in Birmingham and in Memphis. Hurt his arm, and fortunately he had to fall back in singing, and I think it worked out well.
Yeah, Charlie did okay.
If you love Baltimore sports, you'll love WNST.net.